Okay, everyone, welcome to today's eRequesting Technical Design Group meeting. I'll make this start with an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of land on which we all gather today. We pay our respects to our elders past and present and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators and healers. So today, we're just going to go through our usual business. They've then got a change request that's a hangover from the last meeting we didn't get to. It's only a minor one. I don't think that'll take us very long to get through that. Then I'm going to spend some time going through the ballot logistics, with ballot coming up very shortly. Just the process of balloting, what we're going to be doing in the TDG through ballot and ballot reconciliation. And then it's just going to be a final walkthrough of the IG. I'm really looking for that to be led by people on the call. I don't want to walk through every part of the IG, but if you've got questions or you want to go into some bits and details, it's just an opportunity to see what the IG is looking like leading up to ballot. It doesn't have all our changes in it at the moment, but it has the vast majority of them. It will just be finalized over the next few days, but it's our last opportunity to have a look at it before ballot, and then talk about next meeting. So that last section, it's really kind of going to be open. We can take that wherever the TDG likes, and we see how long that takes. Whether we have a full meeting or a shorter meeting today, we'll just see how that goes. Where it's up to you guys. So into our usual business, we have the previous minutes. I will jump to, and I'll place in the chat. So these are the minutes from our last meeting. This was predominantly where we walked through the informative guidance, and we had our motion in the bottom there to include the informative guidance. So that's all there. This was sent out about a week ago. So had a chance to look. There's no comments on here about anyone suggesting any changes. So I'd open it up if anyone would like to make a motion to accept these minutes.
Sure, David McKillop.
Thanks, David. And do we have a second for that?
Michael.
Thanks, Michael. All right, there's no other comments. I will launch a vote. Hopefully you can see that now. Okay, just give that another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll. Do we have any in chat? Yep. So we have 12 plus 1, so 13 affirmative, 0 negative, and 5 abstain. So that motion has passed. Thank you. Moving on to next, other updates. So this is just an update on our timeline of where we are in respect to ballot. So this meeting, 31st of July, is where we are now. We're just going to go through the ballot logistics. We're going to go through a final IG review. Then the snapshot of the eRequesting IG we'll be looking to take on Monday. Hopefully we'll have it all finalized around then, in preparation for the ballot to open on the 11th of August. So the ballot will be open through till the 7th of September. We'll have 2 meetings potentially in that period while ballot is open. And we'll talk about the scheduling of the next meeting, whether that's something we want to hold or not, at the end of this meeting, once we've gone through what's involved in ballot. But then towards the end of ballot and after ballot, we'll be very much in ballot reconciliation, which is what I'm going to walk you through today about what's involved for the TDG, dealing with issues that have been raised during ballot. So we'll walk through that today. But that's our timeline. It's only really any last second changes we're going to put in now from today, and then everything else will be dealt with in Ballot. So looking at other updates, so the HL7AU Connectathon in Brisbane on the 1st and 2nd of September, it is sold out, although I believe that some tickets may be being made available. So if you want to go on the wait list for that, make sure you send an email to events@hl7.com.au. Also, if you already have a ticket and you're not going to be able to attend, please email events as well so that those tickets can be released to others on the wait list. Then some other updates. The firework group meeting was held on the 23rd of July. There was a number of items that were discussed and voted on in that meeting that have relevance to eRequesting. The first one was there that the sex parameter of clinical use extension was added to a number of resource profiles in AU Base. And one in particular there is the AU Base service request that has now had SPCU added to it. We had previously added that in eRequesting, but now we're going to inherit it from AU Base. And I might just show you some of those changes there. Get to the right page. Let's get to I'll put this in the chat if you want to have a look. So you will now notice in the AU Base sex and gender page here, the sex parameter of clinical use extension has been added and has been applied to these profiles. So AU Base patient, diagnostic imaging report, diagnostic report, medication request, pathology report, AU Base procedure, and most importantly for us, AU Base service request. And there is some guidance being added in here now as well for the sex parameter clinical use on its use in these profiles. So with that change, there will be some updates to eRequesting. So we will now reference the SPCU in the AU Base service request, and the guidance will be updated in eRequesting to reflect the guidance that's in AU Base now as well. So those changes are coming through. They'll be coming through shortly. Other changes that were addressed in that meeting was AU Base coverage has been moved to AFMM level 1 in AU Base, which was important for us in eRequesting because we had derived our eRequesting coverage profile from AU Base coverage. It was only draft, which meant it wasn't going to get published in the AU Base release. But the firework group has now accepted that as AFMM1, which means it'll be included in the release, which means we can use it in our profile as well. And then some other items were also moved to AFMM1 for the AU Base R6 release. That included the service request supporting info search parameter, the resource tag code system, the communication request reason code system, and the task business status code system. So they were all moved from eRequesting to AU Base, the code systems, but they've all been accepted into AU Base now and moved to AFMM1, which means they'll be in the release. So that's all good news for us. And all our eRequesting dependencies have now been addressed through the firework group in AU Base. So that was a good meeting for us to get all that stuff through the firework group for eRequesting. Does anyone have any questions on any of that? Happy to go into any more detail if anyone's interested. Otherwise, you can have a look at those meeting minutes. I'll actually put that in the chat. It comes up. Oh, 404 not found. I'll get it through this way. Firework group. Meeting 2025. This meeting here. There you go. Put that in the chat. So if anyone's interested in those decisions, they can have a look. Okay. Moving on to change requests. So we had these two change requests that we were going to go through in the last TDG meeting. We didn't get a chance to do that because we ran out of time. The first one I think we'll go through now. Sorry, I forgot to talk to you about this, Jamie. But are you right to talk to this one in a moment? And the second one's a bit more of a significant change. So that's not something we would have time to incorporate prior to ballot. So that issue will remain there. It is open for anyone to vote on during ballot. So if anyone thinks that's important and something we need as part of eRequesting, that JIRA issue is there. It can be voted on, and then we'll manage it through ballot. Jamie, I saw you camera. Sorry, I forgot to discuss this with you before.
That's fine. It's a relatively straightforward one.
Yes, it is.
Do you want to just bring up, just to save me showing my screen, the
Yep.
AU Core general guidance page?
Yeah, let's do that. AU Core guidance, general guidance. Here we go.
So this ticket was just a very, very small change request to add what's incorporated in 3.1.1, so a reference to guidance defined in AU base for SNOMED CT implementation, I suppose. So the change request is literally just to add a similar statement in eRequesting that references back to the AU base guidance for SNOMED CT. So
yeah, it's literally just this, 311. So a one-liner, one sentence. So this is just to align us with the AU Core guidance there. Did you want to make a motion for that?
Yeah, we'll make a motion to include a blurb similar to AU Core to reference back to AU base SNOMED CT guidance.
Thanks, Jamie. Is anyone interested in seconding that motion?
Sure, David McKillop.
David, thanks, David. Any other questions or comments about that? No. All right, watch it. Vote. Hopefully you can see that vote now. There we go, got the numbers up now. All right, I'll end that in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we have 15 plus 1 in the chat, 16 affirmative, 0 negative, and 2 abstain. So that motion has passed. Thanks, Jamie. All right. Like I said, the second one, it's not something that we're going to have time to get into the IG prior to ballot. I will just show you this item so you can see what it is. This is about the task group considered the anchor of the requesting data architecture for fillers to discover and manage fulfillment tasks, to enable fillers to perform this query on task group using a rev include. To include the task diagnostic request and with a part of. This is basically proposing adding a part of search parameter and supporting rev include on task dot part of. So just letting everyone know that that is there. If you are participating in ballot, you can vote on that item, and we'll look to deal with it through ballot resolution. Just while we're here, does anyone else have any other change requests that they've identified or something that needs addressing prior to getting into ballot? I haven't heard anyone raise anything, but this is kind of last opportunity prior to ballot. Otherwise, it will be issues will be dealt with during the ballot, which is what we're going to go through next, the ballot process. Okay, ballot logistics. So those of you who've been through ballot before, this might be old news. Those who haven't or haven't done it for a long time, this might be a refresher or give you the guide on what we're going to do. I might just probably jump straight into it though. So in respect to eRequesting, we're looking at going for a ballot for working standard, and balloting is the formal process that HL7 uses to get feedback and comments on specification prior to publication. So we have to go through a ballot in order to publish the specification. There are a number of rules that govern how HL7 AU balloting is defined. There's the HL7 Governance Operations Manual, the balloting process, our decision-making practices, which is what we're doing day to day in the TDG, and the bylaws. So that's what governs our balloting process. And like I said, what we're looking at here for eRequesting is we're going for a ballot for working standard. What we did about 12 months ago is we went for a ballot for comment for eRequesting, but now we're going for a ballot for working standard. So we're looking at publishing eRequesting. So a ballot for working standard is used to evaluate content that is eventually intended to be binding on implementers. It's intended to evaluate the content that is ready to implement, but where there has not yet been significant implementation experience. It gives an opportunity for the community to exercise and evolve the standard in real-world implementations before it is locked down, becomes normative, and solicits review from the community outside the development participants. So that's an important one there. Obviously, all of you have been coming to TDG meetings, you're well versed in what eRequesting is all about, but this opens it up to a broader community of HL7 voters. So it gives them an opportunity to review and provide input. And it will authorize the publication of the specification as a working standard through the consensus body. So you can see there at the bottom there's a number of different ballot levels. There's for comment, informative, and working standard and normative. So we're going for working standard, which is also known as standard for trial use. Just as we go through this, please raise your hand, speak up. If you've got questions, want to know more, definitely raise it as we go through this. It's important to discuss any questions you might have. So the timeline we're looking at for our eRequesting ballot for working standard. So the ballot sign up is still open now. It's open until the 3rd of August, so only a few more days now. You have to sign up if you want to participate in ballot. Then the ballot period runs from the 11th of August through to the 7th of September. So that's the opportunity for people to review the spec, raise issues, vote on issues, vote on the spec. And then we move into ballot reconciliation. So that's where the TDG comes in. We're going to go through everything that was voted on in the ballot. We're going to decide what we need to do with it, discuss it, vote on it, make changes to the spec through that ballot reconciliation period. So we'll actually start that ballot reconciliation as soon as we have ballot issues. We won't wait until the end of ballot. We can start working on them as soon as they're raised. And that'll run through likely until the end of November. Hopefully we'll have it all resolved by then or earlier if possible, with plans to publish the release 1 of eRequesting in February 2026. So we're not the only one going to ballot in this period. AU Base is going to ballot in this period for a working standard for release 6. AU Core is going for working standard of release 2. We're going for eRequesting release 1, and the AU Patient Summary is doing a ballot for comment during this period as well. So whereas all our specs, all our AU specs are out at the same time for ballot during this period. So about sign up, there are a few days left. So if you do want to participate in the ballot, you do need to be a current HL7 Australian member, and you need to sign up to participate in the ballot. So there's more information there. I will just jump to the page which has all of that. And I think it is this one. I'll put in the chat. So this is the August ballot. So this is all the information that is included here. If you want to sign up and participate, it's the place to go. Okay, so here's our different responsibilities during ballot and reconciliation. So those participating in the ballot, they've signed up, they're participating in the ballot, they're going to review the specification, raise feedback, and vote on it in Jira. Now, there's an important note here. If you are not participating in the ballot, your feedback can still be voted on. So if you've raised a Jira issue, others can review that Jira issue and go, yeah, that's a good point. We should make that change. And they will actually vote on it during ballot. So it is important, even if you're not participating in ballot and you found things in the spec that you think aren't right, need to be added, need to be changed, raise a Jira. And then others can see those and agree with it during ballot and vote on it. So even if you're not participating, your feedback can still be incorporated. So I might just go through that point. I think we have talked about it a little bit before, but it does show how you can participate in ballot without actually being in ballot. But if we go to the eRequesting IG, anywhere on this page, whichever page you're on, down the bottom here, there is a propose a change link right down the bottom. When you click that, it takes you to Jira. You will need to create a Jira account. They're free. You don't need to be a HL7 member. You can create it, account for free. Then you can raise an issue. So basically press the create button up here. And in this screen, I'll make it a bit smaller. We're going to go through the different types, but you can do a change request, a technical correction, a question, or a comment. You'll see the project here it's about fire specification feedback. Then in the specification, all you want to do in here is you type AU and you'll see AU eRequesting. You can choose the version. There will be a ballot version in here that's not published, it's not available yet, but once it is, you can say the ballot version, or you can say the current version. You give a description, a title to your issue, what it relates to, whether it's artifacts, a page, or sections, and then you can just add your details in here and create it. So it's as simple as that. For creating an issue, you can create those issues on any part of the spec, anything you need to change. And then others can find those during ballot and can vote on them as well. So it's important. If you do think there are problems, please raise them and get your feedback heard. So that's that important point there. Your feedback can be voted on. So you can raise it and others can vote. So
Michael,
yes.
question.
Yep.
Is there somewhere in the spec where you can see stuff that's out of scope for this ballot?
Yes. When we do the review, I will, on the home page now of eRequesting, we have a scope of eRequesting R1, which has the in scope and out of scope. So
Thanks for that.
And that's, I mean, as part of this was raising an issue, what our job will be in the TDG is actually to decide things, and we think that they're out of scope, we'll put them as consider for future use will be the resolution. So we'll go through a bit of that in more detail. So if issues are raised and we don't think they're part of release 1, we can defer them. So during ballot, like I said, ballot is review the specifications, raise feedback, and vote in Jira. Then as a first pass, co-chairs will hold triage meetings outside of the TDGs, and we'll basically review them to work out what types of issues they are, whether they form part of eRequesting or other specs. We will look at proposing dispositions. So what we think the resolution is likely to be. And then what we do is we bring them to the TDG. So all of these issues that are dealt with in ballot need to be voted on by the TDG. So all of our meetings post ballot will be all about issues raised in ballot, and we will review dispositions, we'll determine what course of action to take, and then vote on those and make changes to the spec as needed. Once we've gone through all the issues, we don't know how many we're going to get. I think we had about 50 something for ballot for comment. That's not unreasonable to expect we may have 100 or more during this cycle, given it's we're publishing for working standard. So we'll have to go through all of those through TDG votes. Once we've done all that, we'll then go back to the balloters that have voted negative and ask them if they accept the resolution that TDG has come up with. So then they can withdraw their votes to say, I'm now satisfied that you've addressed the issues I've raised. And at the end, we'll actually confirm whether the ballot has passed or if we need to reballot and go through another cycle of balloting. We'll go through some of those a bit more detail after as well. So like I said, those issues that are raised in Jira, there's 4 different types. Change request is the default choice. So it basically represents a request for change in the specification. So this is, we want something changed. And like I said, that's the default. Most things will come through as a change request. On the other side, there could be a technical correction. So this is a minor change to the specification that does not impact the behavior or of conformant applications. So spelling, grammar, actual errors, those sorts of things can be raised as technical corrections. Technical corrections can be dealt with by co-chairs. Change requests need to go to vote in the TDG to be resolved. So we'll often, as part of ballot, people will identify just minor errors. If they're raised as technical corrections, they're fairly easy to deal with. We'll just make the correction, doesn't substantially change the specification. Whereas change requests are, we need to add or change something more detailed in the spec. Then there's questions. So this sort of feedback doesn't anticipate a change to the spec, but instead seeks clarification on some aspect of it. So like there, in most cases, questions should be raised on chat.fire.org. So that's the best place if you have a question, because then the community can answer your question there, rather than the formality of a question through ballot. And commentary about specifications is not expected to result in a change to the specification or any response at all. For example, great job on the specification. So yeah, happy to have those. But yeah, it's the first 2 are the ones we will be dealing with through ballot. Voting. So people participating in the specification in the ballot will be providing a vote. So there's the option of no vote. So, well, there is no vote. This is the initial state. So if there's been no vote submitted, and if no action is taken by the voter, this will be the voter's final submission status, and no vote means the ballot submission won't count towards a quorum. So it's essentially abstain, although it's abstain is the next one. A ballot, second one is the ballot has reviewed at least some of the ballot material, but has not formed an opinion on whether the specification should be approved or not. Abstentions count towards quorum, but not towards whether the ballot passes or not. And then affirmative, the balloter may have some feedback about minor changes they would like to see, typos, small suggestions, but are overall comfortable with the specification and are happy to see the specification published, even if none of their comments result in a change to the specification. This vote cannot occur if the balloter has submitted a negative comment. So yeah, if you put a comment in there that's negative, your overall vote becomes negative. So everything you submit needs to have an affirmative vote for it to be an overall affirmative vote. And then negative, at least one of the balloter's comments was marked as negative, meaning the balloter feels that the specification might not be published unless the issue they marked as negative have been appropriately addressed. So just on that, each issue is voted on, which culminates in an overall vote. So if you vote negative on any issue, then the overall vote is negative. If you're voted affirmative on all of them, then the overall vote can be affirmative. So just to clarify on that, basically an affirmative vote means you'd like to see the issue addressed, but you are happy for it to publish if the issue is not addressed. Whereas negative means you believe the specification should not proceed to publication unless the issue raised is addressed. So that's a really important to distinguish. If you vote negative, you are saying that the specification should not be published unless this is resolved, which for minor technical corrections and issues, that would be a significant impedance because we have to get the negative votes removed at the end to get the quorum. So if it is just a suggestion or you're not too fussed about it, an affirmative vote will still get the issue looked at, it will still get the issue raised, we'll still vote on the issue. But if it doesn't get in, then you're saying it's still okay. I just wanted to raise it, whereas negative means you can't publish the specification until it's been addressed. So the responsibilities of the co-chairs, like I said, we're going to have weekly triage meetings. The co-chairs are going to go through all the ballot issues that have been raised, and we're going to triage them to bring to the TDG. So we're going to find out, we're going to basically categorize them of whether they're typographical, editorial, and informative issues, whether they're technical corrections, questions, substantive changes, or out of scope. So things might be out of scope because they're not part of eRequesting IG. They may be part of AU Core, AU Base, or the international base. So we will refer them to the appropriate working groups for those. And then, except for the out of scope ones, we will look at whether the issue is being raised is persuasive with a modification, and not persuasive, or something that we would consider for future use. So the co-chairs will go through this process. Oh, sorry, there's a couple extra here. I've already discussed this, but yeah, if we deem it to be out of scope, it may go back to core, base, or the fire specification. So we'll prioritize the issues and identify the ones that are critical to be resolved in this cycle. We'll assign action owners and next steps to issues, so looking at developing resolutions for them, and we'll organize them into potentially block disposition ballot comments. So given that we may have a significant number of issues, IGs normally do as part of a ballot cycle, and normally lots of issues raised. We'll group some together that might be editorial, or they may all be around the same issue that just worded in different ways. We can bring them together as a block vote. And those block votes, we can be voted on together, so we can cover up a whole heap of issues in one vote. Or we'll identify ones that need to be brought out and brought to a TDG and discussed in more detail. And so we'll prepare those preliminary reconciliation packages, and they'll be sent out to the TDG, so the TDG has time to review them, and then we will look at resolving them in TDG meetings or electronic votes. So the dispositions that would be proposed to the issues raised, there's a number of different types here. There's the consider for future use. That's one I was talking about. It's going to be considered not part of the release one scope. So the work groups review the proposal and don't wish to make a change in the current release of the specification, but will consider making the change in a future version. So they're things we deem as out of scope for release one. Persuasive. The proposed change will be made more or less as proposed. So we're happy to accept it as is. Persuasive with modification, change will be made to specification that addresses the issue identified, but it is noticeably different than the one proposed. So that's where we might think, yeah, the issue is valid, but we're going to resolve it in a different way than was actually proposed in the issue. Not persuasive, no change we made to the specification. We'll include it in the resolution why we don't think it's persuasive. And this is where it may be because the work group disagrees with the submission or because the issue can't be addressed within the specification. And then not persuasive with modification. This one's interesting. We do have them, they do come up. The work group disagrees with the issue raised and will not make the requested change, but will make some sort of change to the specification, generally to provide more clarification. So that does happen where we go, no, this isn't valid change, but we will make some form of change to clarify it. Duplicate, it's identical to another issue in the same project. So we will vote on that to say, yes, it's a duplicate of this other issue. And retracted, there's no change. The submitter has closed their own issue prior to resolution. So this will be our job in the TDG. Co-chairs might say, we think this is persuasive, or we think this is persuasive with modification. We'll bring them to the TDG. We'll discuss them in the TDG or have them in e-votes, and it'll be up to you to vote on whether you agree with that resolution or not. So that's what I pretty much just said. So TDG members review the comments provided, including dispositions, and decide and document what changes, if any, will be made to the specification as a result of the comment. So exactly what I said. We'll get to have a look at them, we'll get to discuss them, and then we'll make a vote. And TDG members are responsible for participating in disposition, reviewing the reconciliation package, including comment for those dispositions, attending conference calls and other meetings, and voting. So like I said earlier, even if you're not part of Ballot, you are part of Ballot, because TDG, that's going to be our role for the next few months, is going through all these issues and working out what we need to do with them and making decisions on those issues. I've probably covered a lot of this already, but co-chairs will organise and process Ballot comment dispositions through electronic vote, conference calls and other meetings. If there's, we'll potentially ping the submitter to attend certain conference calls. So if the person who's raised the issue is available, we'll invite them to come to the TDG meetings where we're going to be discussing the issue. We'll also notify all of the TDG members about scheduled calls before. So what we'll normally do a week prior to the next TDG meeting, we'll send out these are the issues that we're going to look at in that meeting with their draft resolution. So you'll have a chance to review them before the meeting. And then we'll look at having block votes where we can vote on a whole heap of requests together. There is always the opportunity, if we have put a number of votes together and made it a block vote, if you agree with all of them except for one, you can say, can we remove that from the block vote? And whether that's an electronic vote or one held in a TDG meeting, there is always the option to pull items out of that block vote so they can be voted on separately. And then we'll, at the end of this, record all our agreements, dispositions and voting outcomes in the meeting minutes, and they'll go back into the JIRAs as well with the outcomes, and the IG will be updated with any changes that need to be made from those decisions. Block vote, like I said, it's a way of grouping set JIRAs for review and voting. Your vote applies across the whole set. You can refer to Telecon if it was an electronic vote to say that we need to discuss this item. We can't just run it as electronic, part of the electronic vote. So that will be pulled, that item would be pulled out of the electronic vote and then scheduled for the next TDG meeting. If you are asking for it to be discussed, you do need to provide a comment and refer to Telecon, and negatives that don't have a comment will be considered abstain. So we do need to understand why they're being referred. At the end of the whole process, HL7AU will contact balloters to withdraw negative votes. So that's where the balloter can accept the resolution and the applied change. And balloters have the opportunity to decide or adjust their vote. The balloter can withdraw their vote after the TDG disposed of the comment. This means the balloter can accept the resolution to the issue raised. Once the resolution is applied, the issue should no longer create a barrier to publication. Balloter no longer has any negative comments after retracting, withdrawing the overall vote changes to affirmative. And that's important. This will be an important process at the end because whether we pass or fail eRequesting for publication. So whether we can publish or not will determine on this. So a final determination is made on whether the specification has passed ballot and can be published. So for our case, it's a ballot for working standard. So we need a 60% affirmative votes, counting only against affirmative and negative. So the abstains, like I said, are part of the count towards the number of participants, but we need a 60% affirmative against negative for that to be published. So that's where it's important that once we've dealt with issues, that those negative votes are removed so that we can get to that pass determination. If we don't, we'll have to work out what the next step is, which is likely another ballot in order to get that if we can't resolve the negative issues that have been raised. Okay, there was a lot there. When we get into ballot, once we have some issues, there will be a Confluence page set up that the co-chairs will use for triage. Once that's set up and available, provided to the TDG, you're welcome to go in there and see what issues have been raised, what the working dispositions are, what's upcoming in next meetings. We will also provide stats as we go, like how many were raised, how many we've got dispositions for, how many were resolved, how many have been referred, those sorts of things. So we'll do that through every meeting so we can see how we're tracking. And it'll be interesting to see how many we get, because that sort of sets the scene for how much work we have ahead of us in order to get eRequesting to publication. So it's going to be quite a significant effort from all parties, from co-chairs and from TDG itself, so that we can get through that through the remainder of this year, ready for publication early next year. Any questions on that? Well, once we get into it, like I said, once we get into ballot, we'll provide more detail on what's there, what's available, and you'll get used to the process. The meetings will be very similar. We'll have electronic votes between meetings. We'll provide results of electronic votes at meetings from the previous fortnight. And we'll get into a rhythm, and you'll see that happening. But we're going to have plenty to do. Certainly, the job's not done yet. We've got a lot to do to get this to publication. There's no other comments. Happy to go through the IG. Like I said, this isn't final. This isn't the actual final version of the IG for the ballot snapshot. We've still got a few changes going in. They'll be going in over the next couple of days, and the snapshot will be taken sometime next week. So this is close to finished, but not 100%. But it gives you an indication of how it's looking. It's got a fair bit of the guidance that we went through last time in there now. So we can have a bit of a look at that. I'll let this be guided by the TDG. So if we want to go in anything more detail, otherwise I'll go through it reasonably quickly, but please stop me, ask questions, bring up anything you want to discuss, and we'll go through that as we go. So let's jump into that. Chat. So one of the first things I'm going to do is you'll see here, this is the CI build, so the continuous integration build that we're currently looking at here. What you will see, so this is continually changing as we get make changes in the IG, they go into this continuous integration build. But what we're going to see is when we go to Ballot, is there will be a Ballot snapshot. So here we've got a directory of published versions. When you bring that up, you'll see that we had a snapshot for the Ballot for comment. That was this time last year. And then we've had some snapshots taken for connectathons and Spark testing events. So once it's available, you will see a new snapshot in here, which will be for this round of Ballot.
Is that on a different screen, Michael?
Oh, yes, it is. Good question. I moved it so I could see it better, but here we go. So I'll just jump back, given you haven't seen any of that. So it's the directory of published, this is the home page, the directory of published versions is here. This is where you'll see, the previous Ballot snapshot was 010 Ballot. Then we had our previews, the connectathons, and then we'll have a snapshot for the current Ballot. So what that means is those snapshots are a point in time snapshot. That's what's being voted on. That's what's being, issues are being raised on during Ballot. But as we make changes, you'll see them come here into the continuous integration build. So once we've gone through Ballot, we're going through the issues, we're making changes to the spec, you'll see them pop into the CI build, while the snapshot or the Ballot remains static. What you will see in here now is we had a vote a few weeks ago about moving this to AFMM1. So you see all of our artifacts now in the IG have a maturity level of 1, which means that they can be included in Ballot for publication. If they were draft 0, they wouldn't be included in Ballot. So we've moved them all to level 1. So on our homepage here, we've got an introduction, we've got our background. None of these things have changed significantly. What we do have now in here is the scope of eRequesting for release 1. So this is again to sort of frame what we're trying to achieve by this release 1, so that those that haven't been part of the TDG meetings get an idea of where we got to and why, and what our scope for this release was. This is all information that has been gathered through TDG meetings and previous decisions. So it's really just putting all that in words so the broader community can see what we've been at to. This is the outer scope, which we made decisions on in the previous meeting as well about these additional technical aspects being out of scope. We have the dependencies. So the IG has dependencies on other things, like you'll see here, the AU base implementation guide, the AU core implementation guide, and the cascades of dependencies through those, including IPA and the like. So that gives you a list of all those dependencies. Now, this is some of the guidance that we had discussed in the previous meeting. This has gone through refinement, incorporating feedback that had been raised. So we've now got an overview of the RESTful interactions and a link out to the actors and capabilities page, and then a typical sequence. So I'm not sure this change has not come in. Let me just refresh this. We've just literally put some changes in, and here we go. Look at that. There we go. All updated now. Maybe that's the old one. This is the new one. Anyway, like I said, this is close to finished, but not quite finished. So now we've got this interaction flow, which we agreed to update this sequence diagram. So this gives an example of some of the interactions about a placer creating the service request and task, the filler searching for tasks, updating tasks, the placer getting their status updates through task, And then also the patient being able to query about their own service request. And then down the bottom here, it's just how to read this guide, which takes you links off to all the other sections in the IG. Conformance page. Conformance talks about the actors that are in our actors and defining our actors and capabilities. It talks about the conformance obligations on them. They shall implement the mandatory and must support elements. They shall implement the required REST API interactions. And then the server needs to declare the implemented resource types, profiles, interactions, and parameters in the server's capability statement. So this is all, this stuff has been in here for a long time now. This basically talks about the conformance requirements, talks about the profiles and extensions, capability statements, and how you declare conformance. Exchange formats, mandatory elements, must support and obligations. So these are the things that we've been making decisions on through the TDG about shall populate if known, shall populate, able to populate, handle, no error. So all the detail on all of this is in here under conformance. It talks about how we present these in the IG using this icon. And talks about the raw representation of that as well. So if you care about conformance, that's where all your detail is about all of that. Now under guidance, we now have a new general guidance section, and we have incorporated the diagnostic request grouping into that. We did go through this in the last meeting, so it's had a little bit of refinement, but with an update to the diagram and the like. So this is all in here, so you can have a look at that. With this now too, any issues that are identified in this, you can raise jurors, they can get voted on in Ballot. So this gives us a good starting point now for any further refinement through Ballot, which I think it's a good outcome. We've got this in here now, so there is at least a good starting point for this. Talks about all the obligations on the task group and the request group. And then we've got our general implementation considerations, which again, we went through last week. But at least now you can see them in the IG in the way that they're going to be structured. And then we've got another section here, which is the eRequesting workflow guidance. So this is the one we didn't go through so much last week. So we might spend a little bit more time here. Noting that this has been through a number of reviews. There has been comments on the Confluence page on this. We've incorporated the feedback from that. So we're not really looking at any changes for that now, but definitely during Ballot, if there's changes that need to be made here, they can be made. So what we've got now here within this is we've actually got our task state machine. So this is the one that we have agreed to in the TDG. So it's a slight variation from the underlying task state machine. We've decided some we did not need. So we've incorporated that here as to what we're using in eRequesting. We have also gone through each of the states and given a description of what the guidance, what the guidance is for that state and the allowed transition states. So those allowed transition states are basically just a representation of the arrows on the diagram in words. I'm not going to go through all this detail here, but happy to take any questions, or if anyone wants to dive into any of this, we're welcome to. But otherwise, you can read them in your own time. We've talked about the relationships of the different types of status that we've got, because we've got a number of different statuses. We've got task status, we've got the status reason, and we've got the business status. This talks about the distinction of them and also the relationship between the task business status and the task status. We also talk about the diagnostic request status as opposed to the task status. So that being the places status of the request, the different states that it can have, and what that guidance is for those. And then the relationships too, again, same between service request status and the service request status reason. And the relationships between the service request status and the task status. So this is where all the complexity of eRequesting is described on this page. Most of this is guidance, as we haven't necessarily put explicit rules in any of this, but this is all the guidance that we have developed during the TDG. These are all things we have discussed in TDG meetings. So hopefully we've portrayed that as the TDG intended, but if there are issues in this, they can definitely be raised in Ballot, so we can address them through that. Sex and gender. This page will be updated. It hasn't been updated yet, but will be updated very shortly to reflect the changes that have just happened in AU base. So it will include the sex parameter of clinical use and guidance aligned to that now has been put into AU base. And so there'll be an additional guidance in here for sex parameter of clinical use relating to eRequesting. We have our eRequesting data for interoperability mappings. So this is tying back to eRequesting data for interoperability. We've talked about that our eRequesting IG version 1 is to align with AU eRequesting DI version 1, which aligns with AU. Clinical data for interoperability release 1. And then we've got our mappings. So this is the AU eRequesting data group item, the data element, where we have implemented it in Fire within the IG. So this is service request code, is the service name as described in eRequesting data for interoperability. We've gone through all of those. The one we added in after discussed in the other meeting was about pregnancy statuses in here. It's not in AU eRec DI R1 or even AU CDI R2. It was something that the CDG advised this would be coming in the future as part of an R3 plus backlog item. And that's why they wanted us to constrain it to pregnant only, so that we didn't conflict with any decisions that they might make in the future around that. So this is just providing that detail about we're aligning to a future concept in AU CDI. We have relationship to other specifications. This talks about the relationship of eRequesting to AU core, AU base, and the Fire standard. And this has been here for quite a while, I think since Ballot for comment. So it just gives you, when you're new to the AUIGs, what those relationships are. With our variant statement, we went through this and discussed it a few meetings ago. This has now been updated, given that we moved the supporting info search parameter. It was a variation. It is no longer a variation because it has been moved to AU base. So that's been updated, but this just gives you an indication. We have no variants from AU base or AU core, but we do profile some additional resources. So this gives you an idea of the resources that we've profiled that aren't covered by AU base or AU core. And then the future of eRequesting, well, the future of eRequesting is the moment to get us to R1 publication in February 2026. So that's giving us the timeline now. This also gives you an overview of our maturity. I suspect what we will do, we currently have all our artifacts at AFMM level 1. I suspect over the coming months with connectathons, we will be able to get a number of our artifacts to AFMM 2, which means that at least 80% of them have been covered by 3 or more separate implementations. Given now that we've got a complete specification, implementers can now start preparing their systems with this version. That's the Ballot version of eRequesting. Then we can test them at connectathons, because connectathons are a really important part of Ballot. So our next connectathon is an important part there to identify any issues that we might have with the spec. But if we're testing more than 80% of the artifacts, we can move them to AFMM2. So we'll probably look to do that with anything that we have good test coverage for, to show that we are maturing these artifacts. Use cases. So way back in the beginning of eRequesting, these were the agreed use cases or brought up. And so they're all documented here on this page. Security and privacy, we added this page. Basically, we're just saying that we haven't specified any specific security and privacy requirements. For general requirements, they're providing a core security and privacy. So we're really looking that release 1 doesn't have any specifics on how this is to be managed from a security and privacy point of view. We'd look to have that in future releases as we firm up ecosystems and the like for its application. And then we have artifacts. If you look at the artifact summary page, this is the all-encompassing, everything that forms part of eRequesting is on this page. So we've got our actors, we've got capability statements, we've got abstract profiles, we've got all our resource profiles, we've got extensions, terminology value sets, examples are all on this page. So if you're looking for something, this page is the one to look at. It's got everything. But if you're looking for something specific, you can go into the relevant page. Profiles and extension has, there's a diagram on here that includes all of our profiles that we've got part of eRequesting. The blue ones are things that have been profiled in eRequesting. The green ones are part of AU Core. And the orange one over here is part of IPS. So that gives you an indication of the relationships between. So we've got them listed out here with all the details. These are our communication request profiles, our consent profile, our coverage profile, document reference, service request, and task. So they're all the things that we've been working through in the TDG and defining. And then these are the other profiles used that include patient, practitioner role, pregnancy status, all of these out of here. So that gives you all the details. As you know, as we've been working through these, you click on each profile. It's got the detailed representation of the profile with the must supports, the obligations, the cardinality, all the low-level detail in here about each of those profiles. The terminology page, this talks about all the terminology. It's referenced in the spec. We've got the value spec about value sets. So these value sets are used in eRequesting, and we've got over on the right here where it comes from. So these are 5 value sets. It's used in AU Core patient. Here we have self-pay codes. It's used by eRequesting coverage profile, and it's defined in eRequesting. So this is a really good comprehensive page to tell you all the terminology you're going to need to know about when implementing eRequesting and where it's defined. And we have all the code systems as well. So this is where you'll notice some of these have moved. So for example, communication request reason, that was previously part of eRequesting. It's now been moved up into AU base because it has broader applicability outside of eRequesting. And all of the other code systems that are in use are all there. Actors and capabilities. So these are our actors, the placer, the filler, the patient, and the server. Each of these is the definition of that actor. And then on the right over here is the capability statement, which is the conformance requirements for that actor. through each of the resource types, what RESTful operations they need to support, what searches, what search parameters, what profiles, and the like, all the detail here about each of those with the conformance requirements for each of these. So should support read, may support this search parameter, shall support these supported profiles, to like all the conformance obligations are in these capability statements. Examples. These are really useful. You might not have realized they're actually in here, but the IG is full of examples. We have examples of all of our profiles in here. Let's just find a good one in here. Let's go have a look at, say, service request, blood group, and antibodies panel. This gives the description of the data that's used in that example. You can have a look at an XML representation of that example, JSON representation, TTL representation as well. So these are really handy if you're not sure where to start when you're trying to code one of these. You can grab the examples that are in the IG, use them as a guide, and there are a whole heap of examples we've included in here, right across the full gambit of profiles. So it's a really useful resource there to have a look at how they look when they're implemented. Support, we've got downloads. This is where you can download the entire specification. You can download the package for importing into your Fire server. You can download the examples. We've got CSV and Excel representations, the details of the implementation guide, and there is a Swagger definition file here. I'm not sure how well they define. This is actually all done through tooling, but they are here to have a look at. And then license and legal, all the T's and C's about the usage of the IG, and changelog. This is also important. If you're unsure when something changed or why it changed or where it came from, we have a full changelog here. When profiles were introduced, what decisions led to that, what the vote was, all the information here. So trying to work backwards from how something got in, you'll be able to have a look at the changelog here and get the full details of how it made it into the specification. So these are all the ones from the significant updates and resolutions implemented from our ballot for comment. So from the ballot for comment onwards, prior to ballot for comment, it was just draft. So there was no change log for there. But once we went to ballot for comment, all the changes have now been logged in this change log. So there's a whirlwind tour of the IG, and issues in ballot may be raised on any part of this spec. So we'll probably be diving into some of these as we have issues raised and look to resolution for them. But happy to be led by anyone in the TDG if we want to discuss any of this in more detail. If anyone's got any general questions, there's no dumb questions. So open it to anyone. Are we happy where we are? In front of the meeting, happy with where we got to?
Thanks for taking us through that, Michael. That was really helpful. In terms of the terminology, is the actual content of the terminology, say for eRequesting, part of this ballot, or is that separate?
So it would be when it's part of the eRequesting IG. So for example, here, like these value sets are defined in the IG. So through ballot, we can make changes to that. We can also, these are things that are being used by eRequesting. So we could change the binding in eRequesting if we didn't think that value set, for example, was appropriate for use in eRequesting. We could change it, we could adjust it, those sorts of things. But the things that are defined outside of eRequesting would not fall in scope. So if we've got issues with other things, we would be referring them to the appropriate owner of that terminology.
In particular, I was interested in the binding of the actual requested substance.
Yep.
Is that going to be included in this ballot?
Yeah, so I mean, if we have a look, that's a good question. So if we have a look at the profiles and let's go to pathology request. So this talks about how we're doing our binding for an eRequesting profile for pathology. And we have binding saying that we have an order of preference here for service request code from the RCPA SPIA reference set. If you can't get something appropriate from there, then you should use the SNOMED CT pathology procedure. If you can't use something from there, you can use a local code. Prefer that over free text. And if you can't, then you can default to free text. So this definition here of how we're binding, and you'll see that binding here on the coding, saying that we have a binding here to the RCPA SPIA. So this coding, how we bind, what the binding strength is on this. So it's a preferred, whether it's extensible, whether it's the different types of binding, they're absolutely part of this ballot. But the actual values in the reference set, not necessarily. That's not part of the.
Okay, great. No, that's useful clarification. Thank
Okay. I'll just talk about again back where we are. So very shortly, the ballot will open. So if anyone can raise issues now during ballot, the like on what we have there, you'll see a notification. You'll see it on Zulip once we have actually got the ballot snapshot available and ready, and it'll be ready for use during the ballot opening on the 11th of August. There will be a ballot period there. So we have a meeting scheduled, our regular fortnight meeting on the 14th of August, and then another one on 28th. And both of those fall within the ballot period. The one on the 14th of August is only a couple of days after the ballot opens. So we're unlikely to have any ballot issues ready for discussion in that meeting. They won't have been triaged yet by the co-chairs. We might not have any issues that are in the state that can actually be discussed. So that meeting is open to anything that the TDG would like to discuss. We can also choose if we like to skip that meeting and then move just to our regular one on the 28th of August. By the 28th of August, we will definitely have ballot issues that we can address in that meeting. So it's getting towards the end of the ballot period. Like I said, we don't have to wait for the ballot to close before we can start to address issues that have been raised. And given the amount of issues we may have and have to address for the rest of the year, it's probably a good idea we start as soon as possible. So I think we'll definitely aim to look at some ballot reconciliation during that meeting. It'll also be just an introduction to the process. The first few will probably be a bit harder while we get used to the process and understanding how we resolve the issues. We'll probably go through, if we've got an electronic vote ready, we may walk through that. And then from then on, from the 11th of September meeting through till the end of the year, it'll pretty much all be ballot reconciliation. So we'll just be working through the issues through there. So interested if anyone's got any topics or anything that we would like to cover in that 14th of August meeting. Otherwise, it may be one we want to have a break before we get stuck into the hard work of ballot reconciliation. Well, not hearing any suggestions. How about I launch a poll about whether we want to hold a meeting? We can absolutely hold the meeting. We can cover any topic anyone likes. But might just launch a poll if I can about holding that meeting on the 14th of August. Just curious for.
So, Michael, if
Mm.
there's not many ballot things, has anybody got any topics that they want to discuss? Because otherwise, we're just
Yeah, well, that's what no one's put their hand up yet. But while we're voting, we can absolutely.
sure.
It seems to me that it might be useful to at least leave that in the diary if there are issues that come up when people are looking at the ballot.
Yeah.
Will there be another meeting before the ballot closes to do that?
So the 28th of August is the one in ballot period as well. So
Okay.
that 28th of August will absolutely go ahead. We will definitely have issues to discuss then. It is in ballot period too. So if anyone's in ballot and trying to work out what to do, you can definitely do that. So we do have 2 bites of this during ballot period. So
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks.
I deliberately in this vote too didn't have abstain. I'd much prefer a preference rather than abstain. Like if you want a meeting or not. So please have your say. Pick one. We've got about 75% people voted there. I doubt the AIs are voting, so I'll might end that poll and share the results. So we had at least 6 people say they want the meeting. I'd be interested to hear if you've got any topics, because I don't know that we have any specific topics, but happy to hear anyone who has suggestions for that meeting. Okay. Well, we've got about 2/3 majority for not holding the meeting. So I think that's the majority. Open to anyone who does have a good topic you want to talk through. But other than that, maybe we'll skip that one and be ready to hit the ground running for ballot reconciliation on 28th of August. Does anyone disagree with that?
I don't think so.
Tough crowd today, Michael.
No, no.
People can use that time to work on ballot.
Absolutely. Yeah, time to review. And I think with ballot too, noting if you are participating in ballot, there's eRequesting, AU Core, AU Base, and patient summary. So if you are a balloter and interested in AU specs, there's plenty to look at. So yeah. All right. Well, we won't hold that meeting on the 14th of August then. I'll remove it from the calendar, and we'll move into the 28th of August for ballot reconciliation. It will be busy. The rest of the year is going to be busy. I don't know, when ballot for comment, it was full on. This is now ballot for working standard, so it's even going to be more full on. But it's a good process. It's a great process to go through to refine the spec and be comfortable with where we land at the end of it, ready for publication. It's a really worthwhile process, but there's going to be plenty of work on us to do to get through it. But it will be good. Does anyone else have anything else for today? Any last minute things before we wrap up today? No? Well, if you do find issues, raise them, like I said, regardless of whether you're participating on ballot or not. Raise issues against the spec if you see them, if you have any issues with anything there. And you can always reach out to myself or other co-chairs if you want to discuss anything you found, brought up. So we're always available to discuss with you. So outside of meetings and the like. So just send me an email or reach out to me or others. I'm happy to talk. But otherwise, good luck. Enjoy balloting. And I'll see you all here on 28th for ballot resolution.
Great. Thanks very much, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michael.